Welcome to 101, a podcast for young women interested in careers in film and TV.
We'll sit down with industry professionals, ask them your questions, and get the answers you need to know.
101. It's a beginning.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to 101. It's a beginning, season 2. We are here with Jennifer and Gilana. This is the first time we've actually had two guests on at the same time. So hello to both of you. Thank you so much for being here.
Hello. Great to be here.
Oh, thanks for having us.
So where are you guys located?
I'm located in Brooklyn, New York.
Yay, me too.
Oh, great.
I love that. Oh my God, that's you. No, I'm just kidding.
Jen, where are you at?
So after 19 years in LA, I just celebrated my 1 year in Indianapolis.
Woo! Yeah.
Trying out the Midwest, trying to see how I can, work more remote from a place that I actually like to be.
Yeah. This is going to be such an organic conversation just for our listeners. Like we were just talking about that before we started. I want to talk a little bit about working remotely at, post-pandemic, during the pandemic. Like obviously, Jen, this is something that is now an option. Do you want to just kind of tell us a little bit about how that's been for you?
Sure. I mean, I think, unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, one of the good things that did come out of COVID was the fact that people did learn how to work more remote, and it forced us into this methodology of working. And you didn't necessarily have to base out of these major production hubs, or there wasn't necessarily, and I'm trying to prove this to myself, but that is there still the stigma of, oh, you got to hire out of LA, you got to hire out of New York. Well, I live there. I've earned my stripes, and do I still have to be there to say that I have the skills that I have? Not necessarily. And I think that people are starting to realize that that's the case. And either you know the job or you don't. It doesn't matter what, if you're flying someone in, you're flying someone in. It doesn't necessarily have to be from Hollywood. So it's kind of an experiment, I'm not gonna lie. And I got here, and my first production, I was in Minneapolis all spring. So that worked out, and I kind of stayed in the Midwest, and I actually did a couple projects over the summer here in Indy. And one was a giant Jim Irsay project I did a couple weeks ago. So yeah, so far so good working remote. So
now I feel like, with the pandemic, it's just opened up a lot more options for everyone. That's really cool. So yeah, let's start with like the basics, because what we really want to do on 101 is to encourage people to have those like fundamentals of what each role encompasses, so that they can then say, oh, this is interesting. That sounds like something I want to do. So let me learn more. So like bare bones, like what do you do?
Honestly, it depends on the day.
I know.
Probably a little bit of everything on every day is my take on being a production manager. I mean, in general, I think the production manager's role is to essentially be a liaison between the line producer and the creative team and the crew and the production team, to make sure that we can figure out how do we translate the creative with the budget and the schedule and the needs of every department, so that it shows up on the day in front of camera or behind camera, so that we can capture whatever is in front of camera, which means that on any given day, I'm, hiring crew, helping to source the correct equipment that we're going to need, that the director can't live without, or the DP, can't get the shot without. It's managing the budget, it's crew payroll, it's problem solving on the fly in every situation. It's trying to prevent hurricanes and create rainstorms. It's both. I've done both, Jen.
I know.
And I also want to emphasize that this type of job goes from pre-production all the way to quote unquote what is wrap, which is when you're done filming. So that's a pretty cool part of the role, where you're involved in every aspect of the production.
Gilana, correct me if I'm wrong. If you're a line producer, very much the same role, not a union position, but also can potentially deals more with the studio, but also might take it a little bit into post. Would that be a fair assumption?
Yes. I mean, generally the line producer would come on before the production manager and would be hiring the production manager if there is a separate line producer. Sometimes those two roles will merge into one, whether they should or not, who am I to say? But the line producer's role starts earlier in that translation of the creative to the budget, and then overseeing how that budget will be spent for the studio or the production company, for the financiers or producers to report to them everything that will be happening and how that's going to be managed. And so they do, like Jen said, start very early on, and often will work into post-production a little more. Sometimes line producers will become a post-producer, but that also varies, I think.
Yeah, the role of producer, man, it's very loosey-goosey.
Isn't it? But just knowing these little nuances that you're sharing with us is like super helpful.
Yeah, I mean, the Producers Guild of America tries to put definitions on every type of producer, literally every 3 years, to make sure that they're current. But it's not enforceable, because there's so many productions, there's so many ways to manage a production that it's just trying to standardize that. I don't think it's ever going to happen, but they're doing their best, and they're at least putting definitions to these roles, both scripted, non-scripted, and all levels of producing. So
nice. So how did you get into the industry? Did you have one moment in your lives that you were like, man, this is for me?
Jen?
Oh, okay. Yeah. I was like, you guys want me to tell my story? Because I didn't really have an aha moment. It was really something that was new and fresh. Nobody was really doing in like the 80s and 90s. And I knew how movies made me feel, and I wanted to bring that to someone. Like, I wanted to be a part of that. And I don't know if this was a triggering point, but I just remember it so vividly. I remember doing a book report in the 6th grade on Steven Spielberg, all his work up until 87 or whatever. And I didn't want to just read a report to my class. So I literally put a table up in front of the classroom, put a sheet over it, pretended I was a radio. And I had recorded my dad being interviewed as Steven Spielberg, presented that to the class. So I could kind of call that my turning point of like, all right, this is what I'm going to do. I think I'm going to do movies. So
that's amazing, Jen. I didn't know that story.
Yes, my dad was Steven Spielberg for a while.
That's you should just casually throw that into conversations. Like my dad, Steven Spielberg.
I don't know that I had an aha moment either, specifically. I think that I always loved movies as a kid. I went to an art school for middle school and high school, and there was the inkling of like a film program beginning, or really it was video. But it was in 1997, to put a year on it, when the re-release of Star Wars came out. And I went with all my friends to the midnight screening, and the credits rolled, and it was like the greatest thing ever, because I finally got to see Star Wars in the theater, having already been a fan. And it was like, oh, wait, these are jobs and people get paid to do this. And I was like, oh, well, I'm obviously going to be George Lucas. Like, that's happening. And everyone said, there's no way that you're ever going to do that. Which made me try harder. And so here I am. I don't know that I will ever be George Lucas, but that was definitely like the pathway for me to be like, oh, I have to be able to make movies. Like, if that's a job I want, and I can do it.
I like that story. That's a good story. Oh, these are jobs.
Look,
for the longest time, I thought it was just a director. I was like, yeah, I guess that's who makes movies. That's
there's hundreds of people on the credits of Star Wars. You're like, whoa, why are like, I think, as a kid, you never watch the credits. But here I was like at the midnight screening at the Senator Theater in Baltimore, Maryland, with hundreds of people dressed up in costume, watching this, being like, and you had to sit through the credits. I mean, like, oh my gosh, there's 15 minutes of credits on this movie, and who are all these people, and what are all these people doing? And this is amazing.
Hashtag stay for the credits.
Yes. So, I know that we touched on how vast your roles are, and just the responsibilities that, that are involved in what you do. Usually our next question is like, what are your day-to-day responsibilities? But I guess, we can talk about that, but I also wonder if there's like one thing that you guys have had to do on a job that was just unusual. And it doesn't have to be bad. It's just like an unusual thing that you had to do that you're like, I
All the things.
I never
Do
thought
all
I'd
the
be doing
things.
this.
All the things.
I mean, honestly,
All the things.
the size of projects I work on, all the things. All things that never thought I'd have to do. I don't know. I'm really good at dealing with porta potties.
I was just gonna say.
My mom recites this. I've complained about it so much. I was in East Bend, North Carolina. We were shooting a movie, I don't know, February, March, and it was a really cold winter. And we were not stealing, but we were buying water from the neighbor's house and running a hose to the porta potties. Guess what? Hoses freeze, and then you don't have water in your porta potties. And so I had to learn how to heat up a hose with heat tape. I mean, really random, like what the hell? Because I didn't have a full locations team or a full transportation team. So I'm literally wrapping hot wires around this hose to try to, I'm seeing Gilana's face. It's like, it's so embarrassing. It's like, that's my life. Like, that's there was no one else. Like, I had to solve the problem. Like, that was it.
Yeah.
No, freezing pipes, I've helped deal with that on a shoot. Not fun.
Every day, there's something new and wild that you never thought you would have to face before. And now you have to figure it out. And sometimes it's a small thing like payroll math, right? Sometimes it's a huge thing like, oh my gosh, I have to get a permit to get an elephant into Manhattan, and the permit office has just denied our permit and we need the elephant tomorrow. Like,
yeah, the elephant story. Yeah.
I love how you casually throw in an elephant story. Like, that is pretty amazing.
it is one of, when I was a production coordinator, it was one of the challenges I faced that marked my path the most, was that I was working on an indie feature and we had a scene with an elephant, and New York City has no bovine laws. You're not allowed to bring a bovine animal into any of the 5 boroughs. The permit office denied our request to bring the elephant into the city for this scene. And so here was the producers like, well, we don't want to pay any more for this permit. We don't want to fulfill all the requirements that the city is saying we have to do to bring an elephant into the city. So with just a few hours left before the next day, I had to then call the permit office and beg and plead and get them to issue the permit by just agreeing to anything and everything they wanted. They wanted an autograph of the elephant, they got it. I think it was like some photos for their child is what we ended up providing. But yeah, it's like, you have to think on your toes and figure out and problem solve all those different kinds of things on a day-to-day, and you never know what it could be. Yeah.
I know you mentioned being a production coordinator. Can we sort of talk about how you get to being a UPM and like what sort of path you can take? I know there's multiple paths that one can take to get to where you guys are. But yeah, just some insight on that, and obviously like any skill sets that go along with those roles.
Oh, Jen and I love pathways.
The job requires knowing literally enough about every position on the project to be able to manage all those departments.
Jen's right, because you have to know what every department needs to an extent, right? Because one person can't know everything, but you have to have a framework for what every department needs, the personnel that are required for them to do their jobs. So you can literally be an art PA and become a production manager, working your way up through the art department office. The more traditional route, or maybe a route, is as a production office assistant, which is how I came up. I was an office PA on a television show, and then I worked my way up for years as a secretary, an assistant coordinator, a production coordinator, a production supervisor, and a production manager. That was the path I took. I know camera assistants who have decided to change course and get into production and become production managers. The DGA looks at it as through the AD department, which we may or may not agree with.
Yeah. We have strong opinions on that.
Yeah, we have some strong opinions as to whether or not an AD is experienced or qualified or skilled enough to become a production manager. But if they have a foundation for the roles and responsibilities needed on a film set, then that is a path to being a UPM. So we have a whole section in our book, and Jen and I spent hours trying to to
Come up
create
with the visual of it,
like,
right?
right, to
Yeah.
visualize the steps that one could take to become a production manager. Locations department, that's another one.
Yeah.
Great place, a great path. You can go from being a unit PA to a locations assistant, to a location scout, to a location coordinator, to an ALM, to a location manager, to a UPM.
Coming from locations, they have the most applicable skill set to be production manager. That and a production accountant, like accounting. If you go through the accounting office, because there is just so much of that accounting structure. But those guys tend to live sheltered lives, so they don't always have the bigger scope. Those poor kids, but they work hard, and that without them, like we would flounder. So.
That's really interesting. So yeah, we'd like to share to our listeners that Jen and Gilana have a book called Keys to the Production Office. You can see them both behind their heads. Love it. Love the plug. So yeah, talk to us about how that came about. Would love to hear about that.
We should actually go back to even the fact that Gilana and I went to college together. So we went to the University of North Carolina School of the Arts. So that's how we met.
That's right.
And Gilana was a major rock star in her class. I mean, there's always like the standout kids, and she was 100% the standout kids. I'm a little bit older than her. But
5 seconds.
I guess it's irrelevant, but anyway, it's true. And then I'll lead up and then you can take over. But so like, I think just as I went through my career and started just honestly gaining knowledge and learning, there were always things that I would sort of start collecting of like, oh, you know what, this is really good information, or this is a really good article, or this is really good. Just like, if I didn't understand something, sometimes I would literally like recreate a document for myself so that I could like interpret it. I mean, I think one of my very first jobs, I had literally developed like a little, I've never told anyone this, like a little booklet that I took with me to the set. And it had like all the production forms in it and how to fill them out. And it was the most ridiculous thing, but I loved it because in case someone asked me to do something like that, like fill out a form, I'd be like, oh, well, I'm just going to look in my little cheat book here. So I would do that kind of stuff. And then as a coordinator, because I also came up as a coordinator too. I did some set PA work, a little bit of office PA, and then APOC production coordinator. And I was on a television show for 7 years. And the producers were very generous in that they always were trying to bring in like interns every summer. We would always have new interns, but these kids, like they knew nothing. A lot of them were really great, like fantastic kids. But they knew nothing. So half of my day when I got these kids on board, it was literally, to onboard them to like, I would develop this booklet of like, okay, here's everything you need to know about the show, some production 101 basics, and the rest, talk to the other PAs and figure it out. But here, like I would literally sit down with them and kind of go through all this. So, but then I found out Gilana had taken a similar initiative.
Yes. So wait, I just want to back up for a second because it's funny. Again, here's something else I'm learning about you, Jen, that I didn't know, was that you had a little cheat sheet book that you were collecting over many years. And I did the same thing.
Oh my God.
I would collect documents from different jobs. I would skim copies. So a producer would hand me something to make a copy of when I was an office PA, and I would make 2 copies. And then I would stick one in my desk drawer and I would give them their copy back.
We're not advocating this. It was just that we did.
Sure. We're not advocating it, but look, the truth is you need to learn something. It's on you to learn it, right? So you have to take the initiative to learn whatever it is to advance yourself. Not everyone is going to hand you the keys as we are. That was,
That's good.
So for years, I was always collecting this information just as Jen was. And then I was working on a movie and I had an office PA who came to me. She was brand new into the industry. She came out of a training program that we have here in New York called Made in New York. And it is an incredible PA training program. And she was my office PA and she was so hungry to learn everything. And I just didn't have the time. And she came to me one day and she was like, I want to do this right. And I keep screwing it up. I need you to tell me what I'm doing wrong so I can do it right. She's like, just make me a list. So I went home over the weekend and I wrote her a book of like 50 pages of everything I needed her to do every day. And on Monday morning, I handed her my little like print out in a loose leaf binder and was like, here, here's everything I think you need to know for us to get through this job together. She loved it. And she told everybody else about it. And she was like, you should publish this. And I was like, I don't have time for that. But I made copies. And I self-published a couple hundred copies, and I gave them to the Made in New York training program. And I gave them to other office coordinators for their office PAs, so that a PA could come in day one and just start to figure it out. And it was very basic. But Jen and I met up at an alumni event, and somehow you had a copy or saw a copy.
You were promoting it. And so I naturally would have responded very jealous, but proud. And,
Yes, that's exactly how you responded.
Probably.
Then Jen, what you said to me was like, this is really great, Gilana, but it's only for New York, which was true, is that it was very New York specific, because I'd never worked in LA or anywhere else in the country at that point. And Jen had the idea of like, well, really, maybe we can work together to expand upon it.
It wasn't until COVID that we had 2 years to write a book.
Pretty fast.
Right.
Yeah.
It was almost 2 years to the day. I think I sent Jen an email on April Fool's Day, 2020, and was like, hey, haha, let's write this book right now before we both go back to work.
Yeah.
And then we started Zooming like every day for hours and hours, trying to figure out how to write the book.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So where can people get this book?
On Routledge.com, which is our publisher, or on Amazon.
There is nothing else like our book out there. I'm just going to put it flat out there. There are books with similar types of content, like for set PAs or general production how to, and so there's overlaps, but there is nothing like Keys to the Production Office that is literally, it's written to be a handbook. It's written to be used on the job, literally as a how-to guide. Like, yes, we recommend you read it before you start a job, but take it with you on that job. And if you forget how to do something, guess what? 100% it is in there, step by step. It is that specific. We're extremely proud of that. Because nothing like this existed, we thought, well, why not? It should. And so we made this comprehensive guide so that anyone could succeed in the industry just by reading 250 pages. There, done.
The other side of this too is that, Jen and I, we did all of our learning on the job as well. Like, there wasn't anybody holding our hand saying, this is how you do this, right? You don't know what you don't know, and you don't know how to do the job until you do the job. And so I think that there's been a lot of people who have tried and failed because they didn't have the support network. They didn't have the mentors to guide them, to point them in the right direction of how to gain this knowledge or experience. And some people can't get in the door at all because they have no experience. And so with this book, at least they have a foundation of all of the tools that they can use to build a career upon. They can walk into a production office on day one, and when the production coordinator says, hey, I need you to PO this thing, that PA can turn to whatever page it is in the book and figure out how to complete a purchase order on their first day of the job. And it makes them invaluable. Mm-hmm. And it allows the production office to better support the production as a whole, because that's the purpose of the office. For me, it was also to create this tool that Jen and I didn't have when we started our careers, that really would have helped, and to make the information accessible. Like, the film business is not a big secret. Tom Hanks just came out just wrote a book. Did you see this? And he's like, nobody knows how hard it is to make a movie. And I was like, yeah, no shit.
No, but what's so funny is like, it hasn't really changed that much in decades, yet nobody
knows what they're doing.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, but it sounds like this is such an invaluable resource for people starting out, because it gives them that advantage that sets them apart from all the other PAs or all of the other people just getting started, that everyone in your position is praying for, to have that person on their team who is ready to jump in and already know like how to help, how to support, how to make sure things run smoothly. And it sounds like such a wonderful resource for our listeners. I think it also sounds like a wonderful resource for people in the business because they can either give it to people that are, supporting them, or refer to it for their own knowledge.
I mean, there's an entire chapter. I mean, it is literally good for anybody in the workforce. We have an entire chapter on just how to be a professional in the workspace. It's really basic stuff, but people have kind of lost sight of it anymore, and it's like how not, how to be appropriate in that space among other people,
There's this gray area in the film industry of what is appropriate and what's not appropriate. And I think we all get very, very comfortable, and we're working so quickly that we forget that we're all humans. We're all people. And I think that there's professional decorum that's sometimes lacking. Our hope is that, this book helps, create more well-rounded office PAs, but also encourages, a little bit more of that professionalism in the work that we do. We're not out there willy-nilly making movies. This is really valid, challenging work that influences a lot of people.
And look, I'll always push the book because I'm very proud of the book, but it's like, if someone tells me that they found the book and they read the book or they brought the book, I mean, if they came from nothing, like, I will hire someone who wants to learn and who wants to be there over someone with experience with a bad attitude who's just there for a paycheck.
As far as accessibility, there's so many people out there that want to get into the film industry that don't have a foundation, that can't go to film school, that can't go to college, that can't go to trade school. And here we're saying you don't need to. Like Jen said, if you're willing to take the initiative, those are the people that we want to continue to inspire the film industry, to change it, to make it better. I think we can all be doing what we do better.
Kaizen, yep.
I mean, I think that's so refreshing to remind our listeners that, because there are people who aren't in LA, they're not in New York City, and it seems like if you're in the middle of, a small town and you don't have these resources, it's good to know that there is a path to being in this industry. It seems like it's very exclusive, because I think in some cases it is, but it's also good to know that there's a way in. And just, Jen, hearing what you said about how having the right attitude and having that desire to learn how to do things the right way, it just takes you so far. How would you advise our listeners or where would you advise them to look for jobs?
So for those of you who do decide to go to film school, those are your comrades, right? That's your starting place right there. All your classmates are your first initial
Network.
Yes, thank you. Network. But for those who don't decide to go to film school, but maybe you live in a production city and there's equipment rental houses that are there. I've seen people be successful going and working at the rental house, and then you're tangentially related to that production, and you're meeting the crew as they come in and as they prep the gear and different things. I was in Minneapolis, and I think a lot of cities do this now, where they have Facebook groups for their film community. Now, I'm not saying it's full of professionals, but you know what? It's full of a lot of people who want to make a lot of things, and you never know who you're going to find. I'm speaking to the Indiana Filmmakers Network tomorrow. They want to be there, they want to, and they want to network. And I've seen how they've made those relationships and then actually produced content from it. And they're doing it. They're doing it.
Finding those like-minded, passionate individuals, right? You can do that if there's a film festival that's in your town that's hosting screenings, but also events. You go and you network and you meet people who have made films that are at the festival, or other people in your community who are really passionate about making films. And then you start to collaborate with them. And film commissions, a lot of film commissions, I mean, almost every state has one now. Yeah. Who does the film office have on their list is definitely a good way. But also like training programs that are not film schools, but PA training programs that a lot of states now offer those programs. Georgia has one, New Mexico has one, Texas has one. Obviously New York, I imagine LA has one. There are a lot of set PA training programs specifically to get people on the film set. And obviously the work of a set PA is very different than the work of an office PA. Made in New York training program does like a 1 day about the production office.
PA boot camp does like 4 hours on office PA as part of their training, but really they're much better at training the set PAs, and they stick in the office PA because they want to be balanced. But
Yeah.
it's a very good program, by the way. They're very good. So.
It's like take every opportunity you can.
Yeah.
And that doesn't ever stop. Even at our experience levels, Jen and I are always learning and taking on new experiences, doing workshops, going to panels and those kinds of panels that we're not on, and listening and learning from other experienced producers and production managers and filmmakers. So that's really important.
Nice. So what is the best part of your job?
I like the creative problem solving. I do. That's, every day is a little bit of a challenge. Every day is figuring out, okay, how do I approach this? How do I think outside the box enough just to tackle this and put the pieces together? I like putting production plans together. I like figuring out the best way that we can execute this. Gilana hates when I use the word execute the vision. It never goes according to plan, but I really like putting that plan together and saying, okay, this is exactly how we're going to do it. It's this time. This is going to be the time. It's going
to work out all as planned.
But I think my favorite part is that part of my responsibility is to take care of everybody. I'm just by nature a caretaker. So, I take it very personally. It's my responsibility to take care of every single person, in front of and behind the camera, and the people that I can't see that are in the office 15 miles away. And as part of the plans that we're making is taking that into consideration. What are we doing to take care of everybody so that they can show up and they can do their jobs? Yeah.
He's just more nurturing. I do the same, but I'm not nearly as nurturing.
Yes, I'm so nurturing. It's also, I just want to say, it's also the thing I hate most. Because it takes every living fiber of my being to do that.
Honestly, I would say one of the most difficult things about the job is I feel like there's a stigma against production always. So going back to what Gilana just said, we try our hardest to take care of our people. We want to treat them right. We do everything we can to make fair deals. I'm very transparent. Production safety is very high on my list. I educate producing team members on what their responsibilities are to as far as managing a risk-free production, just general safety awareness. But because there's been incidences, and I'm not saying it's necessarily always safety related, but people bring their baggage from other shows onto yours, and I get the brunt of that. Production isn't always the enemy, and I personally take offense to someone who comes at me like with their I don't know, fists up, for a better way to put it, where it's like they're ready to fight. And I'm like, look, it doesn't have to be a fight. I'm not a bad guy. That stigma is real, and it's very frustrating to fight. I woke up in the middle of the night thinking about this. I was like, that's what I hate the most.
But Jen, that is the hard part of taking care of people. And is that we're all human, right? We're all people who have emotions, who have experiences that we're bringing with us everywhere we go. We're carrying all of that with us. And it comes out in places where maybe it should, maybe it shouldn't. And it does often in production feel like it is directed towards the production manager in ways that it shouldn't be. And we do carry a heavy load and take the brunt. I had an experience on a show during COVID where COVID just makes everybody exasperated with how much emotional baggage they're all carrying, the weight, the fear of everything that was happening in the high part of the first part of the pandemic. And my job was to assuage those fears and to try to convince hundreds of people every day that I'm going to make sure they don't get COVID, that I'm going to take care of them, that they're going to be able to do their job and come to work and be in a safe environment. And that takes a toll. And so while, it's my favorite thing, it's also, like Jen said, it's also the hardest thing is managing those expectations of others. And because we can't control the other bad experiences that they've had, I think there have been a lot of bad precedents set industry-wide in a lot of ways in how we treat people. That's really hard to change. I think our hope with this book and with us as production managers is to encourage and inspire and influence that change to sort of trickle down and around us, and to work with people who also see it that way. But
Yeah.
I don't think single-handedly we could change it. Man, if a book could change the world.
That positive experience maybe lessens the burden of that negative experience that they had, and reminds people that there are good people in this industry. So, collectively, yes, I think it does take a village, so to speak, but it seems like you guys are doing a pretty good job with it. So
In this industry, we're all self-employed, really. And so you go from one gig to the next, you go from one family to the next. And that's a reminder to create a blank slate, tabula rasa, if you will, for each production that you walk into. The big question, we feel it's really important to be transparent as to what somebody can expect to be paid for this type of role. Either starting out as a PA and then moving your way up, what to expect.
I will say I've done PA work for minimum wage. I've done production manager work for minimum wage. And don't even laugh. I swear to God. This is not California minimum wage at $15.
I just did Texas.
This is $7.25 an hour in little South Carolina. I don't know how many years ago, but I enjoy what I do. So as long as I can pay my rent and live, and I don't live lavishly, like I don't necessarily work to make oodles of money. That doesn't mean I won't take the oodles of money, but I don't necessarily take a job just because of what it is or is not paying. And then on the high end, like, if it's a DGA show, I mean, they have rate scales so that you can go up, depending on where you're working, and you can always negotiate higher.
In New York right now, there's a big push, a movement to start paying above minimum wage in New York. And New York already has one of the highest minimum wages in the country. Once you're starting to do more work, I think it's fair to start asking for higher wages, and also to make sure that you're making as much as your peers who are doing the same work.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that's one thing one of our other guests touched on, that she would speak with her colleagues. And, we really want to encourage our listeners to talk about money, talk about your rates, so that you know what other people are making, so you can make informed decisions when you get opportunities. You can say yes, you can say no, you can ask for more money. The experience that this guest shared was eye-opening for us. Meredith and I were like, really? So
it's important to know your value in the framework of the work that you're doing. And again, what your peers are making for that same work. I'm starting to produce now, and trying to navigate negotiating for myself is really hard. I also, like Jen, I want to do a job because I like it. And that will influence how I negotiate, what the value is to me beyond the financial benefit, weighing the value there of those different things. But yes, the DGA has their rate cards public. And so even if you're working something non-union, or you're not DGA and you're working as a production manager, I think that is always a really good guide for how to negotiate your rate on corresponding budget levels.
We do have those rate cards on our website at 101podcast.com, in addition to their book. So, are there any directors or films that have inspired you or influenced your work, and what you love to work on?
My favorite film is Labyrinth, and I quote it all the time. So there's
I love that movie too.
It's the most brilliant movie. And if they try to remake it, I have no words.
Don't say that.
They're remaking. Never ending story, guys.
I know. There's no original content out there, apparently.
We've told all the stories. No more stories.
Told them all. There's all this.
End of discussion.
Well, I think back in the beginning of this, I said that I wanted to be George Lucas. And growing up, I would say he was one of the most influential people in my film life. And then I learned about Kathleen Kennedy, and I was like, oh, here's a woman doing what I want to do. And then have since discovered there are so many other amazing women who are incredible producers and studio executives and production managers out there that I admire a lot.
We do have a lot of Star Wars Easter eggs in the book for those of you who are Star Wars fans. Just
We do.
I like it. All right. Well, Jennifer and Gilana, thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks to our listeners for joining us as well. And stay tuned. And buy their book, guys. Come on. I mean, let's be serious. I want to buy their book and I'm so excited to read it. So buy the book, absorb it, and we'll see you next time. This is 101.